Sydney Sweeney. Body Wash.
Wishing for a body wash made with natural ingredients? Dr. Squatch has got you covered. Manly scents that make you irresistible, a thick lather that leaves your skin moisturized all day. No matter what you're looking for in a body wash, rest assured, Dr. Squatch is your best bet. Pick up one today in store or at drsquatch.com. It's Dr. Squatch Body Wash for men who prefer natural.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
I called up Barton Gellman over at the Brennan Center because for the last few days, I've wanted someone to give me a roadmap for preserving democracy. That seems a little grand when I say it like that. But then again, Bart was eager to give me a pep talk. So I was on the line with the right guy.
I just want to say to your listeners what I've said to my colleagues. There is never going to be a more important time in your life to be working on behalf of the democratic values that you hold dear. If you've been involved in public life in any way because you cared about doing the right thing, now's not the time to retreat. Now's the time to stand up strong for those values because there's never been a time when they were more under threat.
Bart is a journalist. He's won a Pulitzer Prize. The last time I had him on, he described himself as a catastrophe correspondent. But his work has shifted over the last year or so to trying to prevent catastrophe. Because even before Donald Trump was reelected, Bart had started getting together with politicians and civil society leaders to try to figure out how to respond if Trump won office again. Right now, this bunch is kind of in the wilderness. Bart just spoke with a pollster who said she was getting out of politics altogether. Then there was the constitutional litigator. He got on the line.
And she said in passing that she is sort of, working on the logistics of her move. And I said, move? And she said she feels that she's going to have to move overseas. And I said, you can't leave. You're the one we need to protect the rule of law. And she said, look, I'm on a list of people, who are going to be the subjects of retribution. And I don't want to make myself a martyr. But when I pressed her further, she said she's just considering it. She's making it possible to leave if she needs to, but she hasn't yet decided.
You've spent the last couple of years or year preparing for Trump to retake office in some way or another. Do you think the country's prepared for what happens now?
I don't think it's possible to be fully prepared for an authoritarian wannabe president. The powers of the presidency are so awesome, and the flexibility of the president to do what he wants is so great if the president doesn't mind breaching longtime norms or even breaking the law, that it's going to be impossible to stop abuse entirely.
I think some of my listeners, and probably the broader American electorate, they're tired of being alarmed about Donald Trump. You must meet people like that. What do you say to them when you're confronted with that one-on-one?
My message is that this is our country too, and that whatever mandate Trump has received by winning the election, First of all, I don't believe that his voters, the majority of his voters, are voting for despotism. They may like his trash talk, but I don't believe they really want an America in which you can be prosecuted for expressing an opinion contrary to the president, and so on. And in fact, there can be no legitimate democratic mandate to do undemocratic things. So my message is stay and fight.
Today on the show, if you're worried about how democracy is going to hold up under Donald Trump, we're going to tell you the things you should be thinking about right now. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance. They'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. This month is all about gratitude. But there's one person we don't thank enough. Ourselves. Practicing gratitude can improve your personal well-being. You might find it beneficial to learn gratitude-building techniques from a therapist, an expert. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, you can give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp can help you tackle life's challenges by providing accessible and affordable care. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. With BetterHelp, you can message a professional therapist anytime, anywhere. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched up with a licensed therapist. And to switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. If something's interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals, they may be able to help. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/whatnext to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/whatnext. I want to lay out for my listeners exactly how you've been preparing for Donald Trump to win back the presidency. At least part of what you've been doing is running these tabletop games. Like you literally have a game master and a 20-sided die, and it allows you to simulate what could happen in a variety of scenarios, given that someone like Trump, who said the kind of things that Trump has said, is back in a presidential role. What are the kinds of scenarios you are playing out here? What did you imagine?
Sure. So my teenage son sat in on one of the exercises, and he said to me at the lunch break, "Dad, you know, you're playing Dungeons and Dragons." And I guess that's a little bit true, but we were playing with, over the course of 5 games, a group of 175, and we were assuming a red president. We didn't mean it in the usual sort of red and blue as Republican and Democrat. It's a convention in these tabletop exercises or war games that blue is the home team and red is the adversary. And so home team in this case was pro-democracy forces, and red was an authoritarian president modeled on Donald Trump's, public agenda of what he planned to do.
The thing about these tabletop games is that they involved some powerful people who used to occupy the roles that they played in the games.
We had a couple of former governors, including Christie Todd Whitman. We had a former senator, a couple of former members of Congress. Then were people like, sort of congressional committee chiefs of staff. We had state attorneys general, 2, 3, and 4-star generals who were retired to play the military chain of command. We had heads of organizations, sort of various NGOs and lawyers. We had a couple of former cabinet members.
So theoretically, these are people who knew the levers of power they could pull.
Yes, they understood how their departments worked, and so on, or they understood how their state worked, we had union leaders, we had C-suite business executives, we had religious leaders. We tried to represent sort of government and civil society more broadly.
Which of Donald Trump's statements and goals did you ask them to imagine were really taking place?
So in the first two games, we call them this sort of everything everywhere games. We did not try to constrain what the Red President did. We said just sort of go with the whole catalog of Trump and allied statements about what he would do in power and choose from among them as you will.
Huh. So you're just like, the vibes.
Yeah,
Go for
exactly. You know the vibes. But three of the games were issue specific. We had one in which the theme was weaponizing the executive branch to go after political enemies. So that could mean prosecutions. It could mean antitrust actions by the Justice Department or SEC investigations of companies that displeased Trump. And we know Trump did this in some cases in his first administration, and he tried to do it. He sought grand jury investigations against Hillary Clinton, for example, and his people wouldn't go along with it. But he is likely to have supporters this time in roles who are not as inclined to try to restrain him. That was one game. We had another game that tried to model a mass deportation of immigrants, including even some with legal status, like, for example, the Haitians who live in Springfield.
Who have temporary protected status.
They are here legally, but Trump and Vance have both said they don't count that as legal. And then our third exercise was use of military force against domestic protests.
It imagined Inauguration Day, right? Like Inauguration Day comes, protests in the street, all over the country. What happens?
We imagine Inauguration Week, more or less, sort of a series of large protests in big cities. And Trump ordered the federalization of the National Guard. He invoked the Insurrection Act. This is all, in our simulations.
Reading about your exercises, the main thing that stood out to me was how many people and how much effort is required in order to execute something like a mass deportation plan or respond to protesters by deploying the National Guard. It's a huge amount of people, and not just people in the West Wing.
Right. It requires resources and logistics from around the federal government. There are stakeholders who have power in the states as well.
Like the National Guard, the governor gets involved, right?
Right. So ordinarily, the National Guard is run by a senior officer called an adjutant general. And in the ordinary course of events, the adjutant general reports to the governor and is under the command of the governor. The president has the power to federalize the Guard, in which case he takes command of the Guard and its resources. But, in this exercise, for example, the Red President said, I want to federalize the Guard in all 50 states. And governors, including red governors, opposed that and said, you're depriving us of important resources that we need at home. And then a four-star general who was playing one of the president's combatant commanders said, sir, you realize you're taking away about half of the entire contingency force that we have in the U.S. Armed Services for foreign emergencies. And he was persuaded to scale that way back.
Because it makes the whole country more vulnerable.
Yes.
Interesting. In general, I'm curious whether you found the results of your tabletop exercises encouraging. Like, was there so much to manage that it was difficult for an authoritarian in the president's office to act definitively right away?
Well, there's two ways to answer that. And I think both are true. On the one hand, when we did debriefings of all these experienced people after the exercises, I mean, people were taken aback by how little the blue team could do to stop a president determined to abuse his powers.
Why?
Litigation is slow, courts are unsure, many things that the president wants to do that any reasonable person would count as abuse are not literally illegal.
How far was your red team president able to go?
Well, he was eventually able to deploy armed forces to crush political demonstrations. And he did so in a much narrower way because of internal opposition. And he did so in a less bloody way for a variety of reasons, one of which is that faith leaders sort of deployed themselves and their people in clerical garb at the perimeters of these demonstrations and, sort of faced the troops and basically dared them to use force against the demonstrators.
So if you shoot them, you're shooting through us first.
Yeah.
That's what it required.
That's what it required.
A major takeaway from these exercises was that the United States needs something that Bart refers to as a democracy coalition, a group of political leaders, governors, congresspeople, bureaucrats, who are united in their commitment to following small d democratic norms that have agreed upon red lines for what they would not allow an authoritarian president to do.
What I mean by a pro-democracy coalition is that people who agree on the rule of law and on democracy principles need to unite when those things are under threat. And so ordinarily, it's a strength of our democracy that there are different schools of thought inside a political party, or nonprofit organizations have different set of goals, or this governor and that governor have different priorities. But when democracy itself is under threat, there needs to be an unusual degree of unity to defend it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me because when I read about your idea of a democracy coalition, I sort of started thinking about how the inverse already exists. Like, there is already a group of governors and other electeds who, in the Biden administration, were committed to resisting what he did. You know, you had Governor Greg Abbott having buses of people going to New York City and Chicago. You had fights over whether federal law about abortion and emergency care for women applied in some states and governors challenging that. So I feel like we already do have a little bit of a coalition of conservative lawmakers presenting the country with, like, this is what we will stand up for. And I am curious to see whether Democrats do anything similar and whether they challenge their Republican colleagues to join them.
I don't know to what extent Republican resistance against the Biden administration was carefully coordinated in some centralized way. But I think it does point to the fact that states and to some extent local authorities are independent sources of power and influence in this country, and that pro-democracy governors and attorneys general and mayors have some power to protect their citizens against federal abuses and need to understand the exact boundaries of that power in ways that their predecessors probably had no occasion to do.
After the break, what some folks can do now to prevent the doomsday scenarios that Bart's gamed out. This show is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about Doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It's extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/credit card. This show is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about Doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It's extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/credit card. One of Bart Gellman's colleagues on these tabletop exercises was a law professor named Rosa Brooks. She recently wrote about her experiences in the games. She argued that it's not going to be an explosive action by a president that obliterates our system as we know it. Instead, it'll be lots and lots of little changes that are initially difficult to see and maneuver against. Changes to regulations, civil servants getting reassigned, investigations and audits into perceived enemies that grind along and make dissent costly. Brooks wrote, "This is how American democracy will end. Not with a bang, but with a whimper."
Her point is that Trump may not actually try to do some gigantic, dramatic thing all at once. For example, mass deportations involve a logistical component. It involves the moving of people and material and machinery on a scale that's comparable to a substantial war, and that Americans have never attempted before in the immigration context. It would be very difficult for Trump actually to deport 15 million migrants. I mean, sort of strikingly difficult. And he may actually content himself with starting that process in a demonstrative way to kind of show his public that he's doing what he said without actually trying to ramp up the machinery on a huge scale.
It's an important point. There's been a little bit of a debate that I've noticed online with folks talking about this transition period and what needs to happen. Like, should government workers be trying to preserve documents, data, things that who knows what will happen to in the future? Like, what are actions you think individuals might take right now? Do you think about that?
I do.
It sounds so paranoid for me to say that, by the way. I just want to acknowledge, like, I feel like it sounds really tinfoil hat to say it, but I feel like I have to ask.
Yeah, I don't think it's unrealistic to say that every citizen who cares about the kind of country we live in and who cares about our core constitutional, patriotic American values has a role to play. And part of it is not to abandon the field. Part of it is not, as Tim Snyder says in his wonderful book on tyranny, not to obey in advance. Don't do what you imagine the would-be authoritarian wants you to do without even being asked to do it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that recently because in the last few days, there's been talk about, the DOJ is going to wind down its investigations into Donald Trump. You know, we can't investigate a sitting president. And I think there are a couple ways to see that conversation. You can see that as practical. There's a rule saying we will not be prosecuting this person, so time to wind this down. You can also see it as obeying in advance. You can see it as just like, doing what you think is expected of you.
You know, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not sure my instincts are right, but I am surprised that Jack Smith is not taking steps to preserve what he believes is a meritorious case against the president-elect for a time when he will no longer be in office. I accept that the Justice Department position is that you can't charge or prosecute a sitting president. But it seems to me he would want to be preserving the evidence and putting the cases in, sort of safe cold storage against the day, presumably in early 2029, when the Justice Department could consider bringing them again. I know that he has to stop actively prosecuting once the president is sworn in. I don't know why he has to drop the case.
Yeah. One of the most interesting takeaways from your work to me was for everyday civil servants, like people who might be looking at an incoming administration and thinking like, I'm not sure this is for me. Your advice is to remain in place. Can you tell me more about why and how you reached that conclusion?
I mean, civil servants are public servants. They are doing the work of government for the people at large. They, in many cases, have deep expertise. They're scientists or lawyers or experienced regulators. They're the people who keep our food safe. They're the people who make sure that no one can advertise snake oil medicines. We don't want them to quit because they don't like the incoming president or think that he's going to try to do bad things. We want them to stay in their jobs and do the right thing, follow regulations, follow the law, follow procedure. And if they're going to be fired for that, make the president fire them. Meanwhile, there can be some inertia on behalf of the public good.
The day after the election, was there like a group chat for your tabletop friends? Anyone reaching out, and what were they saying?
Oh, in fact, we're having one today.
What's happening today?
We have invited everyone who participated or observed the exercises to join any of 3 Zoom calls today, Monday, and Tuesday. And we will be taking stock and gathering our resources and coordinating what we all can do in reality, now that the reality has come, to restrain the abuses of an authoritarian president. And I just want to emphasize, this is not some sort of all-purpose resistance. We did not test scenarios in which the president had bad tax policy that we disagreed with, or bad climate change policies, or bad foreign policy. We were looking specifically into scenarios in which the president abused his power in ways that were either against the norms of a democratic system or flatly against the law. And now we're going to have to, I guess, gird ourselves to protect the law and to protect those norms when the attacks come.
Yeah, I wonder what the takeaway will be. It'll be like, everyone here phone 3 friends. We're making the Democracy Coalition. Democracy Coalition is go.
Yeah, well, there's strength in unity. So I think we'll all be encouraging each other to do what we can.
Bart, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for allowing me.
Bart Gellman is a senior advisor at the Brennan Center. And that's the show. Just a reminder here that through the month of November, we are teaming up with the Slate Politics team to bring you The Surge. It's a little bonus piece of content that drops into this feed every Friday. Me and Jim Newell unpacking who is up and who is down in the world of politics. And I gotta say, I think this is the kind of content that is more important than ever right now. There's a lot that's changing. We are people you trust, people who are questioning everything that's going on in the world around us, and we want to share that with you. But if you want to hear The Surge, you got to join Slate Plus. That's our membership program. It allows us to keep the lights on over here at Slate, pays our salaries. It's pretty important to us, and we would be so grateful if you joined us. You can give it a try for free by clicking on Try Free at the top of the What Next page on Apple Podcasts, or you can visit slate.com/whatnextplus and get access wherever you listen. You'll get bonus content like The Surge, plus no ads on any podcasts, including this one. The Surge is available after lunch every Friday, so I'll catch you there. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. We are led by Alicia Montgomery. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.